From John Lennon
We don't like double talking.
to Pope John Paul. Southern California has seen its share of famous faces, well-known places,
And liftoff.
and history-making events.
Disneyland is your land.
From Disneyland to the Whisky A-Go-Go, from the very first Rose Parade to the Space Shuttle's last hurrah. Today we share some of the biggest moments of the past 70 years. KTTV was there through it all, what we call our KTTV 70 stories. All that today, Fox 11 News in Depth.
I'm Hal Eisner. Welcome to Fox 11 News in Depth. This year has been a huge milestone marking 70 years since KTTV went on the air. And we've done 70 pieces to commemorate the occasion. We call it KTTV 70, looking back at LA's biggest moments, including the biggest pop culture moments like this one when the British invasion came to Los Angeles. Ever since 1949, our station has been there for Southern California. Election returns, parades, wonderful Wednesdays with Hopalong Cassidy and Abbott and Costello and more, telethons, and lots of news coverage, walls and walls of tapes of it, including in the 1960s, the Beatles.
I'm not going to get into the religious controversy that you've answered at least 800 times.
The controversy? John Lennon saying the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Happened not long before this interview with us. See the mic?
They were burning Beatle records in the South, you know. It was a fire they had to put out.
These days, it's Chris Carter you go to if you want to know something about the Beatles.
95.5 KLOS.
He's the host of Breakfast with the Beatles on KLOS-FM. He says, though they're tired of news conferences,
The only way these guys could communicate with not only the press but their fans was, you know, with these kind of press conferences.
A couple more minutes for the people at the very front, and then please will you change over.
when you watch the KTTV archival footage taken in August of 1966 at the Capitol Records building, you get the sense the Fab Four were exasperated with that flap. Good reason for that.
Comparing the relative popularity of the Beatles with Jesus Christ, and that the Beatles were more popular.
The Beatles were there to talk about playing at the stadium, you know, and their new record, and they're going to lead them back down this road whether they want to go there or not.
Will you be a little more careful in your answers? I know that all of you are very frank in your answers.
We're as frank as we can be, you know. We don't like double talking. So sometimes it offends people, and sometimes you've got to sort of double back and retrace your steps to explain exactly what you mean.
You could tell, yeah, they get frustrated, but you'll notice they still have to show up because the old world of show business was that, you know, your manager said you got to show up and do the interview, and, you know, they would grumble and put their heads down and kick their feet, but they would show up and do it.
Face the photographers over there, please.
But outside, when they were doing this press conference, there were people all over the place on top of cars.
That was over after '66. That was it. They just, you know, no more touring. We're going to make records. If you want to interview us, you know, we'll tell you.
July 2014, the 50th anniversary of A Hard Day's Night. The film, re-released, showed how much fun they were having back then.
It was fun when it started, but you do that for 2-3 years, the fun kind of goes away and it becomes a really hectic job, and, you know, there's a lot of tension involved.
And then controversial statements like the
"We meant more to kids than Jesus did."
and the tension increases. But you know what? Looking back through our decades-old video library and seeing the Fab Four and that one-on-one with John Lennon,
Do you think that some people are out to get you when you make a statement such as this?
Oh, sure.
John would have tweeted that now, you know, or apologized with a tweet.
so many amazing moments we've shared in this KTTV 70 series. Dan Cohen takes us to opening day of the happiest place on earth.
Southern California history, as the greatest Imagineer to ever live unveils his personal dream come true.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land.
KTTV cameras were right there, opening day at the happiest place on earth. Everyone wanted to be first to see what iconic showman Walt Disney spent all those decades dreaming about. The pomp, the pageantry, hosted by TV legend Art Linkletter and watched by a television audience of 90 million people.
Now, of course, this is not so much a show as it is a special event.
On TV, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The ceremony, fun and organized.
Ladies and gentlemen, that anyone who's been here today will say, as the people did many years ago when they were at the opening of the Eiffel Tower, I was there.
Walt, you've made a bum out of Barnum today.
But for the guests, there were issues. It was 100 degrees that day. The traffic backed up for 7 miles as people who were supposed to show up every 2 hours showed up all at once. Invitations went out to 15,000 special guests, but because of counterfeit tickets, thousands more showed up at the park.
You think, wow, that was really something, to be able to participate in something like that.
Rob Fishley was one of the lucky ones. His church group from Yorba Linda was invited for the festivities.
Our latest and greatest dream.
He remembers as a 7-year-old boy watching weekly updates from Disney on TV. But as far as opening day,
we actually had no concept of how spectacular and special it was going to be.
Actor and future California governor and President Ronald Reagan hosted this portion of the television program.
Since Disneyland opened, these children have been eagerly waiting to cross the moat for a wondrous trip through the Disney imagination.
And then,
all of a sudden, go for it. Off we went right on through into the castle courtyard.
On the other side, some of Disneyland's most iconic attractions, like the teacups, the carousel, and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It was
exhilarating.
Even more exciting, this photo snapped by Disneyland photographer Rennie Bardot. See the boy in the circle? That's Fishley. He went on to work security for Disney for 43 years. He even traveled around the world, helping open Disneyland Tokyo and Disneyland Paris. The Disney dream, then as it is today, a magical place where children and adults can be kids together.
Fantasyland is dedicated to the young and the young in heart, to those who believe that when you wish upon a star, your dreams do come true.
As for Fishley, those early days of Disneyland are days he'll never forget.
Who would come to some place like that? And of course, we know the answer to that now. Everybody wants to come to Disneyland.
Oftentimes, the world's attention has been focused on Los Angeles over the years. Laura Diaz filed this KTTV 70 report when the Pope made his historic visit to Los Angeles.
The Pope crammed in 10 public events during his whirlwind visit to L.A. on September 15th and 16th, 1987.
Only one confrontation marred this end of the parade route, and that came after Pope John Paul was already at St. Vibiana's.
The pontiff will be staying on the 4th floor of the rectory here at St. Vibiana's Cathedral.
It was all hands on deck at Fox 11. KTTV carried every minute of the spectacle live. Blessedly, there was no bad news to cover. 5,000 LAPD cops on the streets, 11 police choppers in the air, and crime dropped. There was peace in the valley and in the basin. The Pope made a chopper ride to the San Fernando Mission. There was a 7-mile parade with the route winding through LA's many diverse neighborhoods. 300,000 people crowded the streets to get a glimpse of the pontiff. Even the non-believers, because in Hollywood, everyone loves a celebrity.
Your smallest decisions can have global impact.
There was a mass at the Coliseum. And another at Dodger Stadium, where people still talk about the Pope's visit to this very day. Mark Langell is the Dodgers historian and the author of a book on the various events held at the stadium.
All these years have passed, and anybody who was there, they just savor the fact that they were there, whether they have pictures or just memories, the one and only time the Pope was at the stadium. So if they were there, it's something that supersedes baseball.
Mark isn't wrong. Selma Castro was a self-described non-devout Catholic back then. An effusive 18-year-old Dodger employee assigned to work the Mass. Let her tell you.
You seen him come by, it was just something that I get chills just talking about it right now. And something just overcame me. It was really beautiful, beautiful feeling. I started crying and I didn't even realize I was crying. Everybody in the crowd was literally feeling the way I was feeling because I could turn to the side and I could see other people crying too.
Vicky Gutierrez was and still is a beloved usher at Dodger Stadium. Her memories are of the crowd.
The people were incredible. They were excited. In fact, they wanted to get down to the Pope to touch the Pope. But, they couldn't do that.
So 1987, the Pope visits LA and has a Mass at Dodger Stadium. Do you think it had any impact on your season?
Well, look at Dodger fans. 1987, the Dodgers finished 4th. So maybe they're thinking they need a miracle. We get Kirk Gibson just a few months later, and the Dodgers win the championship. So
coincidence?
Maybe.
And speaking of divine intervention, it seems to be what a lot of Dodger fans are hoping for.
After that, we won the World Series in '88, so we say the Pope bless the park. Hopefully he can come back someday. Maybe not that one, of course. That's an angel in the outfield. But maybe the next time we'll win again.
Here's to the faithful.
What a day it was as people looked to the skies. Our KTTV 70 Look Back continues with the arrival of the Space Shuttle in Los Angeles.
T-minus 10. We have a go for engine start.
It's May 7th, 1992.
Booster ignition and liftoff of the maiden voyage of Endeavour on a satellite rescue mission.
This was a day for Southern California space engineers to take incredible pride. Endeavour was built to replace Challenger, which tragically exploded in the sky, killing its crew. Our KTTV archives are filled with so much video of this great space plane. Endeavour, 5 stories high, was capable of orbiting up to 28 days. In the capsule, 5 astronauts on a mission to return a major communications satellite, the Intelsat 6. Endeavour was named by school children from middle schools in Mississippi and Georgia in a nationwide name competition. Little did anyone know back then that the future of this great spacecraft would be to help educate children at the California Science Center.
Oh, look at all the people waiting.
September 21st, 2012 is when the fun began.
This is what everyone's been waiting for since 4:30 in the morning.
It don't get no better than this. Wow.
Riding piggyback on that jet, Endeavour made her grand entrance.
This is really amazing.
It flew by famous landmarks like the Hollywood sign.
This is a shot that everyone was waiting for. The iconic Hollywood sign.
It was a parade in the sky, a spectacular view from almost anywhere in Los Angeles.
There it is, coming over El Segundo right now.
But there was an even more incredible parade to come, the one that would take it from LAX to its new home at the California Science Center.
I think of the orbiter as something that pulls people together.
The idea was the vision of Ken Phillips. He's the aerospace curator of the California Science Museum. Long before NASA even thought about retiring Endeavour, he was thinking about giving it a new home at the California Science Center. And once a deal was struck, the work to map out a route and create a plan for bringing the big space plane to LA got underway.
We sped this video up because it crept along at a snail's pace.
People went to great lengths to see Endeavour.
I rode a 50-mile train at 8 o'clock at night, and I took my bike with me. I rode the bike 12 miles from Union Station just to get home since I knew the streets were going to be closed. That's how excited I was to see the spaceship.
The wings were an issue. We were lucky to have roads wide enough to accommodate them. But once this show got on the road, the audience cheered.
Oh my God.
Thousands of people gathered at the Forum in Inglewood to see Endeavour inch past the former home of the LA Lakers.
It was a time when the city was really together in the moment. The diversity in LA, we could see all generations.
Why? This was such an iconic thing. The Delta shape. And there had been 30 years of continuous flight.
So I think it was in people's psyche.
Came into the Edwards complex, landing on runway 22.
The other thing is people saw return sometimes here to California.
Now that bird was on our streets and off to its new home. There were some tricky corners, a couple of glitches, but overall, this was an LA success.
Look at the final result. The vehicle is here, it's safe.
You did it?
Yeah, I kind of did it, yeah.
You lifted about 160,000 pounds and you pulled it off.
Well, I hired some really smart people who knew how to lift it without breaking it.
An iconic vehicle that flew some 25 missions, 123 million miles, give or take, almost 4,600 orbits, and now settles down in retirement for one of its greatest missions, teaching us Earthlings about what it did in space and how it did it. 70 stories for 70 years. KTTV has been there all along. Our look back continues next. It's one of the most amazing venues in the country with a very storied history. Christine Devine has this KTTV 70 story, the Whisky A Go-Go.
So you were how old when you first walked through these doors?
Probably 18.
18?
Yeah.
At the Whisky A Go-Go, Robbie Krieger is a living legend.
We were just starting.
Hard to think of the Doors just starting.
Well, everybody has to start sometime.
That's
right?
for sure.
The Doors.
Long before the Doors were world famous, with frontman Jim Morrison, the guitarist says they longed to play the Whisky in West Hollywood.
It was pretty much the goal, you know, that's where every band at that time would love to play.
I took a trip down memory lane with Krieger.
It was fancy schmancy.
Oh?
Yeah, it was like checkered tablecloths.
The iconic Whisky opened in 1964. Back then, you'd find it filled with go-go dancers. The Whisky A Go-Go was named after a nightclub in Paris. As for early live acts,
Johnny Rivers, you know, he was really the first guy that got started here.
like so many of us, Krieger first came here as a fan. Maybe you saw Jimi Hendrix or Buffalo Springfield. Move up a generation, maybe you saw Kiss or Guns N' Roses or No Doubt or Avril Lavigne. Even rapper Eminem, they all played here.
I remember seeing Cream right there from here.
And you were a fan
and I was standing up like, because you know there were so many people.
Right. To get the good view.
Every lick, you know.
His own band, The Doors, not famous yet, they played down the street.
We were just starting out, you know, and Jim Morrison was just warming up, trying to get his act together because he had never sang really before. And we had this crazy lead singer, and I think they'd never seen anything like us.
The crystal shell is being filled.
The Doors became the house band at the Whisky.
That all the record company guys would come in here to check out the new act.
When at the Whisky, one must dress the part. But the question is, which part, which genre? Because this place has quite a history. Pick your genre. Are you into the Red Hot Chili Peppers or the Ramones? The birthplace of LA's rock and roll scene reinventing itself over and over again for hometown acts like Guns N' Roses.
Had the Whisky not been here in LA, maybe there would be no LA scene.
With the Roxy just down the street and the Rainbow, the nostalgia lives on. While Tower Records is gone, so is Gazzari's. The Whisky A Go-Go remains that go-to place for so many acts. The fabric of LA's music history. Why it's part of our KTTV 70 celebration.
Back with more of the 70 stories covering 70 years. It's KTTV 70 next. We take a look back at the most famous granddaddy of them all, the Rose Parade. It's winter 1890, first day of the year. Pasadena's Valley Hunt Club creates a parade to promote the city, its beauty, and its great weather. Floats look like horse-drawn chariots and stagecoaches. 5 years later, they start taking on the appearance of floral floats. But whether floats like these or this, whether in the 1890s or the 1980s.
I think it has tried to, as best we can, remain a community parade.
Whether Lance Tibbett, last year's Tournament of Roses president, or this year's Gerald Freeney, the tradition continues, and the audiences along the parade route and on TV around the world just continue to grow.
From our statistics, we have anywhere from 50 to 70 million viewers worldwide. And that's because we have floats, we have bands from all over the world. So people are tuning in from Mexico to Asia to Europe.
That represents about 240 countries spending their New Year's Day watching the floats and bands. This video from our KTTV archives. The earliest footage of the parade, even before the advent of TV, was in 1915. And for us at KTTV, the first thing we ever broadcast was on January 1st, 1949, and it was the Tournament of Roses parade. We've been doing it ever since. These images are from the early 50s. The sound is missing, you can't appreciate the color of the flowers, but it was as spectacular then as it is now. How about this video from our KTTV archives in 1979? But whether now or in the late 70s, one thing never changes, camping out on Colorado Boulevard.
What time did you get here?
3.
Wasn't it a little cold this morning?
Of course.
Waiting for the parade to start. When it does, oh, fun. Look, there's the Cal Poly Pomona float from 79. It was called Grin and Bear It. Bear it. Get it? And every parade has had a new theme to give it focus. Your theme is?
The melody of life.
And the goal of that theme, which you and your family came up with, is?
To bring people together. Music is the universal language. It calms you, it soothes you, it heals you. It rekindles our fabrics of life.
What's your favorite kind of music?
Jazz.
You like jazz?
Love jazz.
We have so much archive footage and so much imagery going back to the very beginning of our station. So 49, 50, 51, 52, we have all kinds of footage in our archives of this parade. Is it important for us to have those sort of things in our library?
Oh yes, I think that history is a great, it shows where we've come from. It shows the fact how floats have gotten different, how bands have gotten different, how the equestrians have gotten different, how our grand marshals have gotten different.
We had a huge presence with our KTTV platform at Orange Grove and Colorado Boulevard. Bill Welch announced the parade for 48 years as the floats and bands passed by. He says the last 47 were the easiest.
I got to tell you, the first year was a real killer because I'm up all night, I do the parade, and in those days you could be very active. I'm out on the street, flag down the float of the Queen, climb up on the float, interview the Queen, then say, okay, go ahead.
And Bill was a fixture in our broadcast. So let's roll it back to where we started at the top of the story, as we remember all those great black and white images we showed until color came in, and at that point, everything was coming up roses. Another great story from our KTTV archives. Such a great history and such a great look back. Thanks for joining me for this special KTTV 70 Look Back. I'm Hal Eisner.